Everybody, welcome back to Searching for Political Identity. I am your host, Brian Eskow. Pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much for being here. My guest today is a guy named Scott Bell. You don't know Scott Bell. He's not a famous author. He's not a famous anything. He's a plumber by trade, but he's also a very smart man, and he's well studied in geopolitics. He's been following the money for a long time, and I met him a few years ago when I joined X, which was Twitter at the time, to promote this podcast. It was about 3 years ago, and I've really enjoyed each time I've had him on, and I will have him on again because he just is easy to talk to and he knows his stuff and he talks in a clear-eyed, objective, neutral tone, and that is exactly the kind of person I'm looking to connect with. So I talked with him today about what we've talked about previously, which is how the deep state operates, why the deep state does what it does, and what that means for us here in North America. He's in Canada. I'm of course, in the United States. So the West, and the leaders of the West, and how little respect he has for them. That's the theme of our conversation. So I hope you get something out of it. I sure did. Scott, thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy. Scott, welcome back, man.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Great to be with you. So we were just having a nice pre-conversation to recording, but we were about to get into, well, you were about to ask me a question, so I said, let's start. So go ahead.
Pardon me. Well, no, basically in the environment, like the political and geopolitical environment that we're in, I've kind of backed away from Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I come on periodically and I've followed your podcast because I'm interested in the journey that you're taking as I've been
and I host you.
Yeah, it's nice to come on and get my viewpoint across sometimes, whatever that is. I don't know that I actually have a viewpoint.
Right. We got to figure, I'm going to ask you about that later, but
yeah. But with the geopolitical situation that we're in right now, which, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize it when they're living through history. You know, the blank pages are the parts where there's not that much excitement going on, right? I don't think we're in blank pages right now. Right? There's going to be a lot of stories written about where we are at this time on the planet. And especially with the movement politically, geopolitically. I'm more concerned with geopolitics than I am with local politics, to be quite honest. But so you've talked a lot to libertarians. That's fascinating you quite a bit.
I did find a lot of yes. When I got on X, Twitter at the time, just a few years ago, I found my niche at that moment was libertarians.
Right.
I talked to a lot of them.
And is that still something that you're leaning towards as a libertarian view, or is it that just?
I think I
know that your background is Democratic, and that's from also your upbringing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would say that I remain attracted to and respectful of the libertarian perspective. I think it's really intriguing, it's principled, and I like that. So,
right.
But I'm just not prepared to go in the anti-state direction yet. I'm not. Right. I'm just not ready yet. So I'm really intrigued, but that's all.
So that's the negative that you find with what the libertarians that you've talked to is kind of the anti-state stance, or that's how it comes across to you in
Yeah, there is a sect of the Libertarian Party that is very explicitly anti-statist, and that could mean reduction in the military or this and that. So whether it's militarily, economically, socially, I'm just not ready to say that there is really hardly any role for the state. And so it's intriguing. Right. I respect it, and I think they might be right, and I'm going to keep an open mind to it, because if the idea here is, because people say, oh, libertarians are heartless, not in regards to foreign policy, they want to shut down wars. Okay, that's cool, but domestically, they don't really want to have any social aspect to social justice economically, and I'm not ready to go all in there yet, although I do recognize that the smart economists that I think are smart for efficiency, they say, no, the best way to help people, you want to help people, is to do it locally with charity, not through government. So I respect it. I remain an open-minded.
So let's start right here, right? Just so I have a leaping off point for the discussion is with what you've been researching and the people you've been talking to. I've seen tweets like, should I vote for Trump? And then you get jumped on for that. Is RFK somebody that I should think about with, so where are you leaning?
Okay, so you haven't seen so something extraordinary for me is happening with my X account right now. I have a viral tweet going, and you must not have seen it.
I haven't. I didn't.
Yeah.
I've been working on my motorcycle, so I haven't even looked.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
No, man. In the last 30 hours, it's funny. I've been inching towards. Excuse me. I came out on June 10th. I declared that I was supporting Kennedy, and I was uncomfortable with that because, I'm not in the business of making declarations. I'm in the business of searching for my political identity. But nonetheless, I said, enough is enough. I got to choose someone, and I like him. I'm throwing down with him. I just respect his process and what he's been doing. And so I said, he earned my vote.
Highly intelligent, man. Highly researched.
Yeah. And showing respect for everybody and leading.
He seems to a certain degree. Yep.
Right. And then when Harris was swapped in, I felt a shift change, and I felt like maybe, and so I think I was about a week or two, or maybe even 2.5 weeks ahead of the announcement that Kennedy just made on Friday.
Right.
I was ahead saying, hey, something has shifted with Harris in the race. Maybe I have to choose between Harris and Trump. And so what am I going to do? And so 3 or 4 days ago, I got closer to saying so. And my audience has known that this is really one tortured process to figure out, am I going to get to Trump?
Right.
And so I had my most viral tweet probably 3 or 4 days ago ever, over 1 million something impressions. And I was like, wow, I was like, wow, this is crazy. A bunch of new followers. But then 30 hours ago, after Kennedy's explicit announcement, and not just because he announced it, but I certainly rode this wave. I timed this perfectly. I cashed in all my chips for what I've been building on the Twitter account, which is all this. And I said, you know what? I'm a Kennedy supporter, but because of this, and the other, I'm going to vote. I think I'm going to vote for Trump for the first time. And I said it pretty clearly.
Yep.
And it's exploded. And I've gained like 11,000 followers overnight, and it's got this is like 3 million impressions. So it's crazy. I'm looking at my girlfriend, who I'm like, thank God I'm in a relationship. I can't even believe that. I got a viral tweet going. It's crazy. So
it's funny that you say that, because while you're getting a viral tweet, I've been suppressed. I've been told explicitly that my account has been throttled, and
by X,
my audience. Yeah.
Why?
I'm not sure. I have no idea. You know how I tweet, and when I do come in, and I will make comments that are, so I don't know what I said or
who knows
who I offended. What
I had a similar experience on Facebook. I'm gone from Facebook years ago. So it's unfortunate. Sorry to hear that. You could always perhaps look into starting another account. But but so you asked me this question of where I'm leaning at a time where I went as far as to say, you know what, if I have to choose between Harris and Trump, which it seems like I have to, and I was a little ahead of even Kennedy on his announcement, I said, I'm going to choose Trump. And I'm not comfortable with it, but that's where I'm at.
Okay, so I feel that that's, in the political environment you're in, probably a very wise choice. I mean, in the respect, again, I'm an anarchist. I don't.
So you do have views.
Well, I do have views in the respect that I follow the money. That's always what I do, is follow the money, right? That's what explains geopolitical situations. That's what explains financial institutions rising and falling. This is everything that's going on right now has a lot to do with debt, the fiat dollar collapsing, and a struggle to gain resources to put something solid behind the financial structures that exist in the West. That's what's going on now. So foreign policy wise, do I think Trump or Harris or Biden or whoever it is behind these figures that are, rolling the dice? I don't think foreign policy wise it makes a difference, to be quite honest. Now, I think domestically for your country at this time, Trump is pretty much the only choice, especially with RFK backing him up. I mean, if you look at the Democratic Party and the corruption and the way that they have decided to corrupt the system completely out in the open, it would be hard and good conscience for me if I was an American to back that up. I mean, it was a coup. There's no question it was a coup. Harris or Kamala, is that the right way to say her name?
I was just corrected the other night by my girlfriend, Kamala.
Kamala. Okay, Kamala had absolutely no political backing up until the moment that the Democratic Party decided to honor her with that position. So then the media went into full swing with a complete 180, right? And it's out in the open. It's no longer propaganda where they're hoping that you won't notice. That it really is more in your face. We don't care. This is the oligarchic position that we're taking. And F the rest of you, this is how it's going. Just deal with it, and we're going to pretend happy about it.
Right.
That's an insult to a lot of Americans. It's an insult to a lot of world citizens, actually.
Yeah, and I'm one of them, and not all. It's interesting to see, some of the people on the left who are criticizing me for arriving at the conclusion that I arrived at say, it's such a vapid complaint. She was vice president. Of course, she was the logical choice. So there's that.
Okay, so let's stop right there. Vice president, right? So how would this, if it was done democratically or so-called democratically, I don't believe we've ever seen a democracy work, but that's another topic altogether. If you're looking at Biden for what we have now been exposed to and had known for years, but it's been kind of off to the side that he's not really a competent to run anything, not a household, let alone a country. That's not an insult to the man. This is a mental impairment that happens with people with age that has been hidden from the American public, or at least attempted to be hidden from the American public, right? Why is he still president? If this is the natural way to go and she becomes the incumbent, why hasn't Article 25 been taken? Why has she not been put in place as president and him removed? What? Can you explain why that process hasn't taken place?
No, the only explanation that would make any sort of sense would be that he's not incompetent.
Okay.
And
is there any evidence whatsoever out in public to show that he's not incompetent?
Look, I would just say this. I'm not a doctor. I have long said that Joe Biden is not in a position to inspire me to get my vote. Whether or not he has dementia or he's diminished, I would say it's likely that he does, but it's almost not important to me because irregardless of the diagnosis, he does not impress me. I don't want him to be my president anymore.
I don't disagree with that perspective in the respect that we don't have conclusive evidence of dementia.
But to the point of, yes, when you add all of these things up, going back to 2016 even, you just say, hey, no, this isn't right. This process has repeatedly been flawed to the point where I'm not comfortable and I feel offended. Yes, that's me.
And you've watched over and over where they've actually taken away the population's choice and subverted that choice to what the Democratic Party decides is the appropriate candidate.
Yes, and then they loaded up on Trump like nothing you've ever seen before, and now they're calling him Hitler. And granted that January 6th was an unfortunate day, but to go all in like they did, too much. When you add all of this up, that's what I'm basing my stance on. And not everyone's like that. Some people say no.
Yeah, I
Some
mean,
people are saying, hey, no, we got to move forward and we're never going back. It's like,
so what you're seeing, to be quite honest, is what you're seeing is the foreign policy establishment is who actually has a beef with Trump. That's who has a beef with Trump. That's who controls the Democratic Party. The president is normally given leash to deal with domestic policies, right? That's kind of what the foreign policy establishment will give to a president to allow them to have, public facing image and whatnot. But when it comes to foreign policy, the neocons are who are in charge. They are running the show. There's no question of that. It's an arguable. You can see that in Ukraine. You can see that across the globe. Trump is too crude for them. He says the quiet part out loud. He tells the population what's actually going on foreign policy wise, which is not. It doesn't set well. That's why the establishment per se is so highly against Trump.
that's so interesting to say that he's not necessarily not aligned with their goals. And I want to
No,
know if you think that he is or not. But what you're saying is he's giving away the game and they don't
of
like that.
course, of course.
That's fascinating.
You're not supposed to as the image, right? Like BlackRock doesn't want their representative out there saying, "Oh, you know what? We're there for the oil."
Right.
That's not appropriate. You don't say that. You say that you're there for democracy, right?
Right.
And if you go off script and decide to give away the game almost every second day, it's really just uncomfortable and doesn't work for the powers that be that are after the resources that they're looking for to try to hedge their economy that is now in the tank. Right. So yeah, Trump is uncomfortable for them to the point where they did want him gone. I mean, before the Republican convention, the assassination attempt has been memory hold as though it was nothing. Right.
That was so crazy. Oh.
Well, so crazy that it's not one of still the biggest topics in domestic policies in the States. Right. Why? Because the media machine, which is the DNC, doesn't want you talking or thinking or looking or questioning that. Because
that's
Trump,
a good point. That's a fair point. If that had been a Democratic candidate.
Oh, you imagine if that was Kamala Harris?
It has been 29 days since the assassination attempt.
You got it. You would have a countdown day in and day out, and you would have 24-hour like different people talking about who it might have been or why it was, or you know what I mean? The analysis.
The manhunt continues for the collaborators.
Right. But it was Trump. So let's stop talking about it. That's whatever. It happened. It was a kid, whatever. I mean, you look back at JFK's assassination and the truth that's coming out now, it's not hard to see that the foreign policy establishment, they're kind of unleashed right now and out of control, right? That's why you're seeing what you're seeing in the Democratic Party and why you're seeing it out in the open, because time is running out. They don't really have time to be all that sly or smooth. They just have to do it and get it done, right?
So they prefer that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that debate was one of two things. It was either the foreign policy establishment already having talking to the Bidens and asking him to step down and him refusing, so they gave him no chance knowing that would happen, or they thought that with whatever mixture of stimulants they gave him that he could get through an hour and a half without anybody noticing, and they could run it through till the election time. Get him in one more time and then Section 25 him after that. Then you still have 4 years of a candidate you have control over.
So it was a win-win. So trotting him out there for the debate was a win either way.
Right. And it doesn't matter. You can be on either side of that debate on why it was done, but it works for them either way. Right? Now, the way it happened was a little uncomfortable for them because now they this whole idea of just pushing her to the election and throwing all that money behind her and then doing a 180 in the media about her. Yeah, there's always going to be those hardcore Democrats that are just going to whatever's put in their face is what is the best and let's get and cheer behind it. But I think there's a lot more intelligent people out there right now that are kind of looking, going, hey, wait, hold on. Why is the process being done this way? Why is there no election? Why is there no, like, the DNC, that convention was, did you watch it?
Actually, I missed it, which was really
I
unfortunate because I
watched
should be
parts of it.
watching. I saw the whole RNC basically, and I
Yeah,
should have watched the DNC.
I
I heard it was a
watched
great
parts
production.
of it. Production, of course, because that's what they own, right? They own production. They own mainstream media. That is their machine, right? Um, but some of the rhetoric and some of the just how it went down was almost hard to observe, right?
Well, I
Because
watched that. I think I saw a bunch of the first and maybe the first day, and it was all the anti-Trump, and I was like, man, totally the wrong message for me.
well,
I don't know.
that's their policy is
Yeah, yeah,
we hate Trump.
yeah,
That's their message, no matter what, is hate Trump, right?
yeah.
I don't hear a lot more from them.
Exactly. It's a turnoff. There's nothing attracting a person like me. So they've gone all in. So yes, when you add all of this up, that's where I'm at, and getting a little crap from it, unsurprisingly, from people who feel like I'm betraying freedom in the most dire time, and I just don't buy it. But this is really interesting that so Trump, this idea that Trump is aligned with the deep state goals, but just isn't their preferred
Of course,
puppet.
of course, it's not. It's yeah. You want someone that doesn't go off script,
Hmm.
and preferably
Hmm.
an Obama type figure that even when he does go off script, he does it so eloquently
Right. Right.
that people follow along, and the trail leads right back to where they wanted to be in the first place.
Mm, mm,
Right. That's why Obama rose up and became so um, predominant within the party, is because he just had such a finesse for propaganda that he was perfect for them. He's black, so that gets this whole diversity thing going. And he was so eloquent in his speaking, and his, just his presentation just drew people in, right? Trump, it's funny because he
hmm,
has this mainstream message, but if you look policy wise domestically, if you follow, even his picks now, JD Vance, that was from the left side, but JD Vance also has some questionable ties to the deep state
hmm,
through Peter Thiel and things like that. So, I mean, he's got that movie, he's got that mainstream appeal that's really good,
hmm,
and it's pretty opaque because he's also got the ties to the deep state, the money from Peter Thiel, those kind of ties where when the deep state says this is the direction we're going to go, he really doesn't have much leeway to,
mm,
right, because of his backing. So he looks like the mainstream pick for, but he's also behind the scenes tied into the deep
mm.
state anyway, or the establishment, or whatever you choose to call it.
So tell me about the so whatever you choose to call it. Tell me what it is. What is going on here? We're looking for oil and assets to
Yeah, it's
to
foreign
to cover
policy.
to cover our collapsing fiat system.
Exactly. You've got a pyramid scheme that's basically inversed. And so the debt, which is really it's kind of an illusion. The Fed prints money as need be, but there is bonds that are out with the American currency. Now you have BRICS that's challenging the American dollar. Basically, what really, it's not so much about the fiat currency as that they started to use the American dollar as a weapon. And that's where it went south for the deep state. That's where it
About
went
when?
south.
Whenabouts did they do that?
It's been quite some time since they started using sanctions. Like Iran's been sanctioned for many, many years. Cuba, right? But when they went all in all around the world, so now you have large economies that are saying to themselves, okay, we trade in US dollar, we're tied to the visa system and everything else. But as soon as we do something that the USA is not aligned with, they have the option to make the dollar a weapon and start taking resources away from us and
Hmm.
stealing our money. Well, now you've got nations that are standing up saying, okay, you know what? We don't want that as a gun to our head. We're actually going to go with our policies, with our currencies. So Russia's sanctions are a perfect example of that. I mean, you saw Biden doing these announcements of all these sanctions. What a lot of people don't know is a lot of banks in that, when he took them off SWIFT, like told the White House, do not do this. But they did it anyway. Now, so what do you have? You have a nation now that has grown because you've isolated it economically and forced it to another adversary of yours to do trading with.
Mm-hmm.
And what have they done? They've succeeded. They've grown. Their GDP is higher than it was before the sanctions. Where are we in the West? We're in recession,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the backfiring of that, it's devastating to the foreign policy establishment, to the monetary system as far as the US dollar goes. And as the BRICS grows and gets more and more power behind it and more nations interested in it, it's kind of like a bully in the schoolyard that now a few of
Mm-hmm.
the kids he's been beating up are standing up, and the bully just starts throwing stuff everywhere.
So you're saying this dynamic with the deep state is that we are trying to control geopolitical events through our money system,
Mm-hmm.
and we're getting to the point where we've provoked people enough to rebel against it,
That's
and
right.
now we're losing ground.
Right. And losing ground fast. Because at the same time, we also, with our currency, offshored our industrial base. Okay. So if you're going to be into a military situation where you have adversaries that you have to confront militarily, what do you need? You need an industrial base, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, Ukraine is a perfect example of that. Shell production is a huge issue in that conflict. And what's the problem? Well, the West can't produce shells at near the level that Russia and China and Iran and the different nations that are at war there can produce them, right? Where is our industrial base? Even just the military industrial complex, the greed that exists within that, we have this for profit production system for our military, whereas these other nations are, their production is for need by the state, right? They have extra production waiting with people
Mm-hmm.
getting paid to come back to work, even if they're not working, getting an income so that they're available to ramp up production to 24 hours, right? We don't do that here because we want to pay as little as possible for as much production as possible for the highest profit as possible,
Mm.
right? So Patriot missiles are another perfect example of the fact that we can only make, I forget what the numbers are, but you have to shoot 2 per missile. And the way they've been fired off in Ukraine and in Israel, we're running out and the production just simply can't keep up. So you we're in a situation where the foreign policy establishment, which is in actual fact a billionaire class, right, that run things. They're multinational companies and multinational owners of mines and production around the world that now in the West are facing financial situations that aren't fruitful for them and in need of resources to back up their production, and it's being taken by our adversaries.
So you're saying we can understand what's going on in the world right now through thinking that our deep state is desperate, their financial system is collapsing, and so they're searching for hard assets.
Absolutely.
And what's an
Lindsey
example?
Graham
How do you
gave away the
translate that to
game.
some? Yeah.
Lindsey Graham gave away the game just a little while back. It was democracy, democracy, democracy. That's what we're fighting for in Ukraine, right?
Mm,
Democracy.
hmm.
We have to save democracy.
Sure.
And
Sure.
it wasn't that long ago that he said, I forget, on MSNBC or wherever it was, oh, there's $12 trillion worth of assets there. We can't give that to the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the game.
So would this game not be being played if we were in more stable position, or would it be being played anyway?
Well, see, that's the issue is greed. Human greed factors into how we've corrupted our system. The liberal establishment has been corrupted through greed to a point where, I mean, there's only so many people in Washington that can have mansions and yachts, right? Until the money starts to dry up, right?
Mm.
So Raytheon, um, Boeing, I mean, all you have to do is watch these companies and what's been happening with them, right? Any war is stocks going up, right? Afghanistan, 20 years. You know how much money was made in the military industrial complex during that time? You know how many rich people were created?
Mm.
It's a very, very lucrative game. But when you have now an economic system, it's not quite there yet. The US dollar still has dominance around the world. It's not going to happen like that. But now there's an actual challenge to it. So that's very wealthy people in conflict with nations, not other people, with nations, right?
Mm.
And the neocon kind of strategy also is an ideology. The ideology has been there since, well, it's been there probably 40 years now. And they also have that ideology that they have to have Russia. There's just certain ways of thinking that creates this mindset. But that's who runs, that's who runs the show, is the foreign policy establishment, right? These are heads of large corporations and billionaires that are basically running things.
So if you were in a room with these guys in good faith, trying to be constructive, another way to ask this is, what would you do if you were in charge? What should a president be doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny because things have been pushed so far now that unfortunately I think they have to be they're going to be, I should say, solved militarily, which to me, diplomacy should always be the way. There is value everywhere that could be traded. I mean, we have intellectual assets that could be traded. I mean, greed is at the core of this, right? That if you can't trade and see mutual benefits with that trade and be okay with a limited amount rather than having to have it all.
Mm.
How that happens on the planet with the people that we have actually, the levers of power, I'm not sure how that would come about right now. It's a complicated issue.
Mm.
And you have a lot of more powerful adversaries up against the West than the West even realizes, that the leadership in the West even realizes. There's still that exceptional feeling in the establishment that they, no matter what, have the power to decide what's going to happen anywhere on the planet. And they're finding out actually that that's not the case, and they're not sure how to react to that. So that creates really unstable political situations in the United States, because anybody that challenges anything that they're trying to accomplish is, you can't have that person in power. So you might have to try to get him eliminated, even maybe have him shot.
Yeah.
Right. Now, it's funny because, as I said, the threat isn't even as much as you would think. Trump isn't that threatening to the foreign policy establishment. He actually had put in his cabinet last time many of the key figures in the neocon movement, right? His vice president right now has ties to Peter Thiel, Palantir, like a whole bunch of CIA and military industrial complex people. So I think they're just, it's hard to say. There's enough of us out there that follow geopolitics closely that are actually talking out and have an audience. I don't have an audience, but there's many now that do.
Yeah, that's growing. You see Dave Smith. Do you follow Dave Smith?
Yeah, I do. I also follow the Duran, which is two Alex. They're um, from Europe, and they give day to day. It's quite droll and boring, but I spend about 4 hours every morning following it. Right, so um, it's not that they have a huge audience, but at least you get really good information from the ground without bias. Right. It's more like me. It's more just objectively looking at what's happening
Right.
without opinion. Right. It doesn't matter what I think about it. What matters is what's happening.
So America is part of an imperial is an imperial force,
Well, of
and
course. I mean, that's kind of is. Do you not find that that's kind of obvious now?
I don't know. I see America trying to fight Russia, trying to support Ukraine, which is not even formally part of NATO, not part of NATO. Why are we doing it? Well, to support the little guy against the big guy invasion. That's the Kamala Harris explanation. Is that necessarily obvious to me that we are acting as an empire, protecting our imperial interest? I'm not that smart. I'm not that well read. So I go to people like you who are explaining to me what's going on.
So Ukraine is an issue that, if you really want to understand it, John Mearsheimer, you might want to listen to his explanation of what happened to Ukraine and how that came about. John Mearsheimer, have you heard of him?
I've heard of them.
Yeah, he's a political analyst that you might want to listen to. There's a few people. It's a very complicated situation, but it's been going on. That war is 10 years old now. Um, the so-called invasion was actually brought on by a doubling and tripling of shelling of the Donbass by the Ukrainians to kind of entice them in, because the Russian speaking population had been, the civilian population had been shelled from the Ukrainians for quite some time. And when they saw the buildup there, they were trying politically to get Russia to come into the country. So they doubled and tripled their shelling.
Why would they want that? Why would they want that?
Um, because you want to be able to say that the big guy invaded the little guy.
So that what we
That's
can
part of the
start
narrative.
so
That's
that we
part
can
of the
start
narrative.
shipping bombs and
Right,
guns.
right. You you do realize that Afghanistan was pulled out of right 6 months before that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so now
Mm,
you have a conflict that's come to an end that you can no longer siphon money off. It's done. You've got all you can get out of it. Um, you've
mm,
got this other conflict on the way, but you need it to start. You need that. So you get them to start shelling twice and three times the amount.
mm,
Now there's no choice. Even though there was a buildup on the border and he was trying to have diplomacy and try to find a way out, I mean,
mm.
he had to try to help the population. That's just the truth of it. I don't have, you got to understand that I don't have a Putin preference. I don't have a Trump or Biden preference. I'm not aligned with any nation particular or per se, not even my own. Canada, as far as I'm concerned, is part of the United States. We just
Yeah.
have our little own political rhetoric up here for fun and then do what we're told.
Mm,
Uh, and that's okay. That's fine.
mm.
I'm more interested in just what people are doing with and to each other around the world, um, right or wrong. I just want to know what's actually happening. I'm not going to tell you who's right or wrong in the situation. What I can tell you is what's happened as
Is there
best, best of my ability.
What's the relationship in your mind with Israel to all of this? Is there any? I'm curious. 'Cause-
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
tell me.
So I wondered when that would come up between you and I. You're Jewish.
Yep.
I've seen quite a few of your tweets and your opinions on certain people and how you view what their message was or wasn't, and so let's get this out of the way right off the hop.
You're an anti-Semite. No.
I am the furthest thing from an anti anybody human, whatever their faith, be that Muslim, be that Jew, be that Christian. I don't, to me, that's irrelevant. That's your right to have whatever you choose to make you more comfortable internally as a human being, to feel secure within your life, wherever you live in the world. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. For me, it's about human vulnerability and human frailties, and we all have them. I know I have them in abundance, right? I have empathy for any human being anywhere in the world that suffers. Okay, you don't have to tell me what your faith is to know that if you're hurting, it hurts this way.
Yeah, I have a mentor that I love so much who's a fitness guy, really successful fitness coach, life coach now, that whole industry. And his part of his sales, if you will, his marketing is to say, I don't need to know anything about you to know that you have pain and you have
Yeah,
insecurity. We all
of
hurt. We
course.
all have anxiety.
We're human beings.
Yeah.
We're human beings. That's part of being a human being. I know I've talked to quite a few in my time. They all tell me the same thing when they get vulnerable. So let's take anti-Semite, Jew, Muslim. Let's take all that away. All the faith stuff away. Okay, so now a word enters into the picture called Zionism. Right? What do you think that means? What do you think when you think of the word Zionism or Zionist?
A movement dedicated to forming a state of Israel, a Jewish state of Israel.
Yeah.
In modern times.
Okay, so you're aligned with that ideology then?
Not necessarily. I know what it is. I know enough to say that. I think I'm searching. I just had a guest literally yesterday talking about this very subject, and I'm still developing my feelings. I have very mixed feelings. I need a lot more reading and a lot more soul searching before I can answer this very important question. But I don't know.
It is an important question in the respect that I think there's a population that is being manipulated very effectively by both rabbis and by a political figure and political figures for their own gain, and have been manipulated for a considerable amount of time. And the manipulation has worked really well because there is a real angst at the core. There's a real pain because of suffering that has touched almost every single person in that community through the past.
Yeah, you have this unbelievable, interesting, controversial, you might even say, concept in Judaism, which is that God promised these people this land.
Right.
And then you have the Holocaust.
Right.
Very powerful
forces.
You add it up, it's like, well, should these people have this land? It's a tough one.
Well, so if you look historically back through, not modern times, go further back, Jews and Muslims lived together in peace and harmony for a great deal of time on that landmass. And they lived in harmony, and they lived within each other's trading sectors and everything else. It worked perfectly fine right up until the modern era and World War II and a Western push for certain things. I don't think this is as easily talked about as we can do in even half an hour.
So is it the fact that Israel
faith, because I hate that it comes down to faith and giving one ideology against another ideology, when in modern times, if you get to the core of the issue, it's greed and power that is actually at the core of what's happening right now. And it's consuming a great deal of negative energy on the planet that could create the end, to be quite honest. I mean, when you have a certain population that has an ideology that if the Holocaust comes, that's okay because that's what's meant to be. That's dangerous. That's a
I mean,
dangerous
you're
place to be.
you're saying that Jews in Israel might get to the point where they say, in the name of self-defense, we can do anything. Is that what
There
you're?
are some that are
Yeah.
being pushed by rabbis to have that exact viewpoint.
Yeah. No, I would say.
And they're up against adversaries. You have to understand something, that these adversaries are not what they were 30 years ago. The military
Mhm,
that Israel has, and with United States backing, is not what it was in the 90s.
mhm,
It is not the same era.
mhm.
So you have very powerful adversaries that are being provoked that
Yeah.
can do
The
a
stakes are
great
incredibly high.
deal of damage,
Yeah.
right? And
No.
so what you have to do is you have to convince a population that, okay, even if that happens, we should still go forward and still antagonize and still create this situation, because that's what is written. Okay? That's a
Yeah.
dangerous ideology in my viewpoint, right?
No. If what you just said is the reality, then I would agree that there's a lot of potential for a lot of it. It's insane. I don't know if that's all true, but I'm with you. I'm with you. But answer me this: what is the connection, if any, between the deep state and the military industrial complex around the world and the state of Israel? Is there? Because people talk about
Well, of
neocons and the
course,
deep state.
Israel has been conducting, and it's a big part of our foreign policy. APAC is a huge part of our foreign policy. That is part of the establishment.
So do they wanted us in Afghanistan? They wanted us
Oh,
in
absolutely,
Ukraine?
absolutely. Iran was the target when they invaded Iraq. It was supposed to be Iraq, then Iran. Um, that foreign policy has been um, based and basically come from the Zionist movement for years. Absolutely, yeah.
And so that's what I have to confront. How do I feel about Israel? And how do I feel about the fact that a lot of smart people seem to think that Israel has had a profound impact on how we've behaved on the world stage? It would be a
There's
lie
no
to.
question. It's out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
did you watch Netanyahu's speech in Congress?
I missed that as well.
Okay, so these are things that if you observe them, yeah, you really
I
have
know.
to.
I heard it was, euphoric applause,
Right,
everyone standing.
right. About going to war with
Yeah.
an adversary that we don't have the capability of fighting.
He was Iran.
Iran. He's been
Yeah.
wanting, Netanyahu has been pushing for a war with Iran for years.
And I
Years.
guess and I guess you have to just say, hey, we are the best friends Israel's ever had. And the most charitable way to look at it is that they're fighting for their survival, and we've been with them all the way. And are we going to do what's necessary to keep them going?
Okay,
It's
so
a
they're
terrible
fighting for their
situation.
survival. They're fighting for their survival, but what has created the controversy and the military action against them is
That's a
them
great question.
provoking it.
Is it, or
Okay.
is it the fact that or is it the fact that the nations around them didn't want them to ever be there?
That's not the case at all. The West has, like, now I have to say, very recently, there's been a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which that scares the establishment a great deal,
Hmm.
because now but what Israel and what the foreign policy establishment has managed to do has got Muslims that have fought amongst themselves for decades now together. Okay, and Shiites and Sunnis, there was a time that they hated each other just as much, and now they're standing tall together against this push. And unfortunately, we talk about Israel, we talk about Judaism, we talk about anti-Semitism, we talk about all these different ideologies that are at play here. And I'm not saying that they're not at play within. It's a good way to manipulate a population to believe and stand behind what the people in power are trying to get them to do, especially when it's to die for them. Okay? It's very useful that way. But this comes down to resources. Iran sits on an oil field that is immense, immense. They also have control over the Straits of Hormuz, which is how Saudi Arabia gets their oil out. That's their means of finance. So Iran has the capability, if Russia and China stand with them, of becoming extremely wealthy by trading their oil fields to those countries. China is a huge requirement for crude, right? And they have the ability to shut off the Straits of Hormuz, which could actually stop Saudi Arabia from being able to sell a lot of their crude. Strategically, Iran is a huge, it's very important to the powers that be, to the financial structures, as is Russia and Ukraine. These are all interconnected financially. And unfortunately, the population has been convinced that these are issues that are based in ideology and,
right, morality.
And faith. Right. And that has nothing to do with what's actually happening.
So does Iran not pose a threat to Israel?
Absolutely, they do. And Israel has just punched Iran in the face. And there's going to be, I'm actually quite nervous when it comes to geopolitics, because what they're capable of, and also what the States is capable of, and the escalation that could take place could get extremely out of hand, especially with the people that we have calling the shots in the West, especially. Tony Blinken is an idiot. Anthony Blinken is not a smart man. He has no diplomatic skills whatsoever, and he's running the show to a great degree, or at least guiding things. He's a dangerous person.
Why do you say that?
So Sullivan. I've heard it said that he's Netanyahu's lawyer, and I kind of agree with that. Because there's nothing Netanyahu can ask for that Anthony Blinken won't say he's not asking for it and then give it to him.
Gotcha.
But again, I hate talking about it in the perspective of faith and religion and morality.
No, I'm not even going there. So
that's the whole problem I have with this. Or you're an anti-Zionist, or you're a Putin puppet, or unfortunately, no. What it is understanding the situation on the ground. What it is that, like Gaza is, it's also natural gas and beachfront property that can sell for millions and millions of dollars. It's very valuable land.
So let me ask you a question. Is it your perspective? Is this a widely held perspective among anti-war people such as yourself, people who study geopolitics, that the deep state, I want to know what the relationship is between the deep state and Israel. Is it symbiotic, or is it that they're one and the same?
It's symbiotic. It's symbiotic. It's a relationship that formed and kind of evolved over the time since World War II.
Is it that, hey, I'm Israel, the threats to me happen to be extinguishing the threats to me happen to be in the interests of the American deep state? Is that basically what it is? Or is it even deeper than that?
Let's put it this way. Giving the illusion that there are threats to me gives me the capability to, with a moral high ground, go out and try to exact punishment and take resources outside of my realm. Does that make sense to you?
And so it's the American deep state, or it's the deep state?
They're both one and the same. They're one and the same. AIPAC, the Congress, it's.
So that's the game. You're telling me.
We talked about this before, where this whole idea that there's this, there's these five guys that sit in a room, and this is what's decided, and this is how we're going to do the world. There's no Illuminati. There's none of that kind of stuff going on. There are also factions in the deep state that argue and fight and combat each other because they have different ideologies or different ways of wanting to do things, or a better understanding militarily than others do. I mean, there's infighting all the time. But what it comes down to is the world runs on economics. It all comes down to the economy. Always. Always, 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 it's how we trade and who has the upper hand. Do you
So you're
understand what
saying
I'm
the deep
saying?
state, whose primary interest is economic power,
Yep,
uses Israel
that's
and
part of it.
and
Israel is
Jews
part of it. Yep,
to create the illusion of moral high ground, to do wars that serve
yeah,
the economic interest.
of course. That's exactly what happens. And look at World War II, the tragedy of, there's a lot of history in World War II that's misunderstood as well. But the tragedy of what happened to the Jewish people is beyond belief. So it's used by really nasty people in a way that it feeds into this idea that we have been so badly oppressed that whatever we do now
Mm-hmm.
is excusable. It's okay because
Yeah.
you don't understand what we've went through, right?
Right.
And there are many, many Jewish people that have family members or history that is devastating to them. And it's real, it's honest pain. But they don't project it outward the way that a Zionist in Israel does, because it's indoctrinated into them from birth to just feel like there's enemies all around them. That's not a feeling that they don't have. That's not an honest, it is honest to a
Mm-hmm.
great deal of the population. It's real for them. But it's not actually what's going on outside of their realm, outside of their community, if that makes sense to you. There's bigger interests happening, and their
Mm.
pain is being used to manipulate how they feel and how they react to it. The poor are always manipulated into dying for the wealthy
Mm.
through propaganda. It's been that way in war since wars have began.
I'll tell you, man, it's a compelling argument. It's hard to pick a bone with it. I'm certainly not equipped to in the moment. So you're
Again, I'm not even saying I'm with this side or that side
right.
or what
No, I
I'm
know you're doing what you do. You're laying out what you believe in your heart to be an objective view, and
yeah.
I think you do that well.
So that's, I mean, it's a difficult issue because foreign policy wise, right now, you have no president. Like, that's my opinion. I base that on what I feel to be credible evidence. Okay. So we're not sure in the West who exactly it is that's running the show, right?
Right.
We now have a candidate that's put in front of us that had absolutely no political angst whatsoever or no political power before the machine got behind her and pushed her forward.
Correct.
That's just the truth. That's not, that's, you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
That's what's happened,
Right.
right?
And as we said earlier, it's such a turnoff to me. And being uncertain about my Jewish identity and my feelings about Israel, all of that, not just like in the same way I said earlier, I'm not ready to abandon statism
Right,
domestically.
right,
I'm not ready to say I'm an anti-Zionist for
right.
several reasons. And so I say, look, you got Trump who says, screw you, machine, but it also supports Israel. It's like having my cake and being able to eat it too.
Well, RFK supports Israel as well.
Exactly. So
Um,
it's attractive for me.
but Israel, you have to understand that Israel is a very, very powerful state or part of the machine because of the resources that's available from that landmass.
Mm.
That's a jumping off point for resources. Iran is so wealthy in resources, it's not even. That's why BRICS is such a threat to the foreign policy establishment, including RFK, including Trump,
Mm.
right? Is that movement to start working with each national currency back and forth, excluding the US dollar, when the US dollar is in such decline, it's a very difficult prospect for the United States and the West in general.
That's the most potent weapon our enemies have, it sounds like.
That's what's being fought right now. The war is an economic war, and unfortunately, the West is losing. I'm just kind of trying to think back what I was saying as we took the break.
Yeah, you were saying it's an economic war.
Yeah. Okay. So back to that. It's actually quite interesting that power has managed to really, propaganda has worked to such a degree. It's to me, it's fascinating how well it works, in the respect that, I mean, let's face it, there's two different things. There's the monetary system, and then there's economics, and the two are separate. They're not the same thing. Economics are trading and value and production and what you can or cannot provide your society, the greater good of everyone, right? That's economics. Then there's the monetary system, which is a system that has been corrupted in the West to a point where the transfer of that system towards the top end has gone so far out of hand that Canada, the States, I'm 60 years old, 59, almost 60. The change in my country, as far as infrastructure goes, as far as how our society is, and the quality of life, has declined so much that it's recognizable just driving down the street. I hear that time and time again from people in the States as well. You have our adversaries, the people that we're supposed to hate, right? And if you think about it, who are we supposed to hate? We're supposed to hate Putin. We're supposed to hate whoever, Idi Amin. We're supposed to hate Saddam Hussein. We're supposed to hate bin Laden. It's always one man, Gaddafi. Always one person we hate, right? And then we go into that country and we do what we do to save democracy and clean that place up. It's not working anymore. Hasn't worked for a while. Yeah, the propaganda works, but the actual events are not taking place the way that we're being told or we're supposed to believe they are. So we're at a big disadvantage now economically because of that. That's why you see the decline in lifestyle and that in the West.
And it's only going to get worse. It could get a lot worse.
So that's another interesting, that's a huge topic right there. Is a lot of people that I talk to ask me, well, what do you think is going to happen? You know, we're a modern civilization. We're the one benefit that we have in North America is we have a big moat around us, right? There's a lot of water between us and any adversary. So we've been relatively free from military destruction on our continent, right? So our infrastructure can be repaired and can be brought back, right? If it's not attacked, which, I mean, the foreign policy establishment leaders are really pushing to get us attacked. I'm telling you, like at some point we may see our own actions come back to haunt us.
Yeah.
I hope not. I like, to me, I would rather see diplomacy throughout the world. That military action to me is, I don't care what leader it is, you're sending your young men out to die. It's just a tragedy wherever it happens.
Yeah. And you're saying it's always these bigger interests at play.
Of course it is. Yeah. Like it's kind of, historically, all you have to do is look back and you can see that that's exactly what took place. We had the Depression before World War II. What brought us out of the Depression was military action and an industrial pickup and the need for rebuilding. And I mean, that's an economic requirement that was served by a great deal of destruction.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, that is what happened. Now what we're looking at is a failed state or a declining empire that is lashing out and trying everywhere to gain resources back to hedge their monetary policy that has failed. It's a failed policy.
That's interesting. That's your thesis of what's going on right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to put it as simple as I can.
Yeah. No, it's
Now,
quite
that's
interesting.
not to say that there's not ideologies at play and there's not factions that believe what they believe.
Right.
And that takes place all, I mean, that is part of what our human condition is,
And
right?
so therefore that becomes very complicated to parse through this stuff.
Of course it's complicated because there's no one person pulling these are, so if you say 1 or 0.1% of the population, well, the population's 8.2 billion people or 8 plus billion people. 0.1 is still a fair large number of people.
That's why it's so easy to go down the Illuminati rabbit hole because
Yeah,
your brain wants to assign a central body to
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
complicated
We
process.
want it to be simple, right?
Hmm.
Like it's easier to think about it if it's in simplistic terms. Oh, well, if
Yeah.
this guy is just a maniac and he's doing this. I hear that all the time with the argument of Bibi Netanyahu. He's pulling all the strings. Well, yeah, no. I mean, he's a figurehead and he talks and he's someone that's out in the public view. But are all policies after what he says, and is everything decided on his whim? Absolutely not. No,
Mm.
of course not.
Hmm.
There are all kinds of powers, there are all kinds of positions from other forces and other places that are at play here.
Hmm.
Some are pulling, some are pushing, right?
Yeah.
The world is not a simple place.
Mm.
Putin
Right.
is not the guy that makes every decision in Russia. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
It's there are governing bodies that take care of all kinds of different things.
Lots of
Right?
currents.
Of course. And unfortunately what we've got into is human nature.
Mm.
I think what happens is greed tends to corrupt a person, and the more a person has, so to put it simply, our leadership in the West, my thesis on that is what we have is dumb money now. So what I mean by dumb money is this is money that you're born, you have a nanny, you have a butler, you have 7 people around you your entire life telling you how wonderful you are, helping you put on your clothes and giving you food and making sure that your Rolls Royce is running on time so it's warm when you get in it to go to school. Okay?
Good deal.
This is your life. So then you're done in Harvard, you're done in Oxford, you're done in whatever school you are in whatever country in the West that you're done at. And then your father, whoever that father is, says, you know what, we're going to put you in a political position where you have power. Okay. Now you're in that position. You go up the ranks and you become Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
Hmm.
Okay. You've never worked a day in your life. You've never seen any kind of real strife, struggle, or hunger.
Hmm.
Right. And now you're making decisions for a country that is based on your ego
Right.
and how important and wonderful you've been told you are since the day you were born. Okay? That's not very smart money.
Mm.
That's not a very smart or bright, or even if they're highly intelligent, common sense wise, just intuitive, empathy, just to have a connection with how the actual community that he serves runs is not valid, because it's only how a very small portion of the population live, right? It's hard to empathize with people when those people have always been your servants.
That's why Donald Trump is such an anomaly.
Is he an anomaly though? I hear Trump actually is quite a nice guy. Like
Right.
from what I've heard from people around, that he's a
Seems
very
like it.
decent and I mean, the propaganda against Trump for so long has made it such a difficult thing to actually get through the muddied waters to find the truth, right?
Of course.
Because the machine came against him almost immediately and has been out to get him ever since.
Yeah.
Right?
And you got to ask why.
That is a valid question. And, you know, I've asked myself that many times. Again, I come back to, I mean, I don't have any skin in the game in the respect that I don't vote. I don't vote here in Canada. I don't engage with the political system whatsoever because I simply don't believe in it. I exist where I was born and within the means that I have because I'm a human being and this is where I exist in. I have no allegiance. And I've told you many times I'm an anarchist. I have no allegiance with my country I have allegiance with the human race.
Yeah.
I'm a human being living as a human being in the human race. And it just so happens that out of my sheer luck, I was born in this particular geographic location.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear you. That's why I registered in 2012 as an independent because I said, why would I call myself a Democrat? I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, your show, Searching for Political Identity, is valid. It's a very valid thing because that's part of what your ideology, what your identity will be emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I understand that drive. I understand that need. I understand that desire to have an allegiance with a certain. For me,
Mentality.
it's right. For me, it's more just I'm fascinated by the human race. I'm fascinated by how we organize in these modern times. I find it fascinating how we allow certain powers to come to be and allow ourselves to be manipulated and pushed around by certain ideologies. I find it fascinating.
So do I, and I'm searching for the best one and the one that resonates with me.
That's where I struggle because in all my time I don't know that there is a best one, and I
Well,
don't
that's not
know that I
encouraging
am.
because if people who are so well read, such as yourself, haven't gotten anywhere, what hope do I have? But it's a journey, and I'm enjoying
Yeah.
talking to
Oh yeah.
people. I hope
Listen,
I get somewhere.
if I was attached politically, if I wasn't an anarchist and didn't have the viewpoints that I do, I would vote for Trump if I was an American right now. I have to to be quite candid.
Mhm.
If I was given the choice and said, "Hey, you got to vote," and in having to vote in the political environment that is laid bare in the states right now, there is no question with RFK supporting him and endorsing him, I would vote Trump.
Yeah.
Not simply because it's a no-brainer that it's a winning side, but because in some ways I do feel that if the foreign policy establishment, if the establishment at large want him dead, then there's something that I like about him.
Right.
There's got to be something deeper that I don't know that's important that he
Right.
has to offer us as a society that is positive because the foreign policy establishment, the blob, whatever you want to call it, is out of control in the West. It really is. And it's damaging our infrastructure. It's damaging our society. It's damaging our reputation at large in the world. Most of the world does not agree with the United States policy or Canada's or the West's policy. A great deal of the population on the planet are in vast disagreement with the way we are doing things economically and militarily in the world. They
Can you
have
give
a
me
right.
one example?
China, Russia, Iran, um, Africa. Most of the continents or most of the countries in Africa are rebelling against the American and the West right now. There's at least 3/4 of the world's population that are at odds with our foreign policy. Now, in our perspective, from the media that we consume and everything else, we're the good guys out there trying to hand them democracy and liberal ideals, right?
Mhm.
How dare they tell their women to wear this, or how dare they act this way, or how dare they act this way? If that was so attractive to all these different countries, then why are they so upset? Well, it's when you're telling somebody you're right, and the way you tell them you're right is by taking their resources militarily, it gets a little tiresome, right?
Right.
And so that's what's happening, is the world is growing frustrated and tired with how these resources are being taken and consumed without the promise of the democracy and liberal ideals that they were given.
Including here in
Absolutely,
America.
including here,
I know
including
you're in Canada,
and it's
but
the same place, dude. Canada, America.
yeah,
There is no this
right,
distinction that's
right.
made, I find
So
comical.
forget the distinction, but here too. So
Right,
too here.
North America. Yep. I was just in a city north of me about a year ago. It's called Sudbury. It was a mining town, and Canada is one of the biggest miners. Like, we do mines all around the world, and the United States militarily protects us while we're doing it because we're good at mining. It's just one of those things Canadians and Canadian companies are very prevalent at, right?
Mm,
So Sudbury was a nickel mining. It since has kind of diminished in the amount of nickel it mines and whatnot. Uh, the amount of fentanyl users and just broken infrastructure, like roads that we were in a Jeep and it felt like it was going to fall apart
mhm.
because the roads downtown were that bad.
Right, right.
Now, we have a coffee place called Tim Hortons that's pretty famous in Canada. We had to physically honk the horn and lean out the window to get the homeless people and the fentanyl addicts out of the way to go to the drive-through.
Right.
At I wept when I came out of the hotel. It broke my heart. I saw a guy with cerebral palsy that could barely walk trying to get out of a dumpster with a pillow. And to see this disabled person, homeless, trying to get out of a dumpster,
Yeah.
surrounded by homelessness and people with nothing. It Man, when I was a young man in Canada, our reputation was stellar.
Right.
Our cities were bright and clean, and they
Mhm.
were. I remember. It's not a fantasy. I know they were. We had actual running infrastructure. We had, street cleaners. We had things happening. We had employment. People were happy, right? Um, Man, I see a lot of just destruction around here right now, and that's a
Mismanagement. So have our governments been mismanaged or is this intentional? Last question.
I don't know that it's intentional. I don't think anything humans do are really, when it comes to this, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's yeah, mismanagement in the respect that we have dumb money, and it's been dumb money that has been making decisions for a considerable amount of time, and it's mainly in their own interest,
Right.
right? So it's a human trait, right? Like, if ego gets in the way, and power, it seems that once someone has unlimited resources, so try to make this as brief as possible. Let's say I have $1 billion. Okay, so I have my yacht and I have my cars in every city, and I can go into any place because I have my private jet and I have my houses all around the world, and I can do whatever drugs I want, and I can have whatever women I want, and I can do whatever I want anywhere because there's no laws that apply to me because I have the financial ability to get away with it,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the strata of that kind of wealth. And then I get more money and more money and more money. I get kind of tired of it. What do I want? Well, I feel pretty important because everybody tells me how wonderful I am all the time. I think I'd like to run something. I'd like to have some power. Okay. And then that power leads to kind of a insanity, kind of a twisting of the mind that then one becomes, they feel like they're godlike. They feel like they should have the right to make determinations on other people's lives at a whim. Um, And that seems to have happened in the West to a great deal. The decisions are made. I mean, I don't even know how many people have died in Ukraine. It's got to be close to 1 million. There's over 1 million that are at least gone and wounded beyond repair. This is in a 2-year period of time, and we talk about it off the cuff like it's nothing.
Right.
That's a human tragedy.
Yeah.
That's a devastation, the likes of which is beyond understanding. But we talk about it like it's great.
Yeah. Shrug it off.
It's bizarre to me.
Yeah. What we're willing
And
to
this is
accept.
about resources. It's not about religion. It's not about democracy. It's not about all these things that we're told it is about. It's not. It's about wealth and it's about consumption. And that's sad. It's sad that as a species, we're still doing that and we're getting better at killing each other while we do it.
So you reject any notion one final time that Putin has aims to go on marching militarily.
He absolutely none. He has no choice now but to completely take over Ukraine. He's going to do that. He's basically said as much because as soon as they entered Russia proper, NATO has basically invaded Russia now. So all bets are off. He was trying to keep his partners, China and Iran, and that kind of because China was pushing them to get a deal diplomatically with Zelensky. Just because that conflict, no conflict with the way that they're trying to run the BRICS and get that financial system going is beneficial. It's not beneficial to have war with what they're trying to do. Now, our economy is based on war being beneficial because it's the sales of the arms that's a great profit maker, right? With the BRICS system, war is not profit driven.
So that's a big motive for the war right there, to derail the BRICS.
Of course. That's my point all along.
Right,
That's what it's about.
Right. Yes, it has been.
But
yes.
they're losing.
Wow.
And so when a bully starts to lose ground, a lot of times that bully will start to throw more and be more dangerous. Right?
Yeah.
If that bully thinks he's going to lose, he might bring a weapon that you don't want him to bring. Right? So if all he's been doing is punching you and then he shows up with a gun, it's pretty scary. Right?
Yeah.
Well, so in that metaphor, the gun is nuclear weapons.
Right.
Right.
We've been safe. We've been safe for it's an interesting time, and like you said, these are no blank pages.
No, we are in some highly written about history. We're going to be talked about this era for a long time and studied. I think studied to a great deal.
And with that said, I just am not willing to vote for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump.
Good for you.
I had it all together, and I'm just like, you know what? This feels like an intense, dangerous time, and you've explained why. And I'd rather have a strong guy than a backup who got tagged in. No disrespect.
Yeah, without anybody voting for her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody. It was the establishment that said, "Here's who you're supposed to like." That's got to be insulting to anybody. I mean, it's got to be kind of hurtful.
Yeah. It's amazing how it all played out with Biden. Again, going back to the point of not everything's necessarily totally orchestrated, but it just makes you scratch your head and go, man,
oh yeah,
they played it perfectly. If it was organic and how it really happened, man, they just played it to a T and rode that wave. And so,
well,
they lost me. They lost me in the process.
Congratulations for at least to this degree coming to a decision that you're comfortable with.
Right.
That
you're
still going to study. You still have
exactly a baby step. This is I haven't found my political identity. I found out what I'm going to do in November, and that's big. Good. But it's just the beginning. So I hope to have you back. I always really appreciate and enjoy having you.
Brian, I love our conversations. I really do. I enjoy them very much. I'm glad that I was so worried because of some of what you were talking about and some of the tweets that you had, that my perspective in Israel would be insulting to you, and I'm glad you were open to hearing me.
I can't. I would be quite pathetic if I wasn't willing to hear out a good faith argument that is not pro-Israel, that Israel is not unicorns and rainbows all the time. It would just be wrong. It would just be wrong. I can't do that.
That's very, you know what, because that's where discussion is very difficult these days, because the ideologies are just, the emotional drive is so deep that it's hard sometimes to discuss these issues with any kind of objective sense, right?
I may arrive, and it seems like I'm balanced now, that I'm likely to arrive at a pro-Israel position, but I if that's where I arrive, I want to get there the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott Bell, thank you so much, man. Look forward to our next one, and just appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep. Have a great day, sir.
You too.
Bye-bye. Bye.